Welcome back to Cut and Splice. This is Jason,
This is Gil.
And Matt,
and tonight we're going to be talking about a movie called Cadillac Records from 2008. And this is going to be a real fun one. We are joined for the first time by my friend Mike Maye.
What's going on?
Um,
Hey,
Mike and I have been good friends for several years now. And this is going to be an interesting episode because I know we've done this at least once. I was trying to remember with which episode it would be, but this episode is going to be interesting because this is one of the first times that uh, we are watching a movie that neither that well that none of us had seen except for Mike. Of course, he was the one that told me I needed to see it, and then I passed the idea along to the other guys. But prior to seeing it for this thing, we really hadn't um, ever seen it. I believe, is that correct, guys?
yeah,
yeah,
that's correct for me. Yeah, yeah. I guess we should think about what's. I don't think there was ever an episode that
No, I think there
none
was
of us have
one.
seen the movie.
What was it? I remember right before here. Oh, gosh, I should have written this down. Uh,
There's a bunch of them that two of us didn't see, but
yeah. No. I'm pretty sure.
well, I mean,
Didn't
technically the
wasn't there one that we all went to
Paddingtons.
the theaters? Yeah, the Paddington ones. Yeah, we
Well,
neither of us,
Matt
none of us.
saw Paddington one, I
no,
think,
I
before
saw
me.
Paddington 1 in theaters, so.
Oh, okay.
Not that it
Well,
matters.
I don't remember what it was.
We'll
I
think
thought there
about it.
was one we
Think
went to a
about
theater to see or something like that.
it.
I don't
He
remember.
said
Yeah,
not that it matters.
let's not waste
That's
time
good.
on this.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
it's this is
anyway,
very
the
important, but thank
the
you for being here, Mike, and for suggesting this movie because it definitely is it's a change of pace for us. It's good.
Well, thanks for having me, guys, and I'm really happy to be part of the hat trick that is watching this movie for the first time because it's very impactful as a musician, and I think that as film guys, you would appreciate both the music and the cinematography behind it.
yeah.
Um,
Real quick before we talk about the movie, just wanted to say that uh, it's worth mentioning that we had really wanted to get Mike on the podcast earlier with one of our most watched episodes, or perhaps our most watched episode, which
Easily
was,
almost.
yeah, easily our most watched episode. You might even say our most successful episode if you were to gauge it by views. Uh,
You're welcome.
but but yes, Mike introduced me to RRR, and so that was a movie that I cherish now. So
Yeah, that we cherish. It's a hit. So
yeah,
so hopefully we'll get lucky with this one too.
yeah,
Lightning strikes twice, gentlemen. Lightning
Yeah.
strikes twice.
yeah. So as usual, we're just going to talk about the movie for a bit, or talk about our recommendations, and be real spoiler free in case we decide to convince anyone to go watch this movie, because I would really think people should see it before they listen to us break it down into every single little detail later on in the latter half of this thing.
Yeah. Um, I guess Mike, maybe you should start as far as like where you first discovered the movie and the impact it had.
Yeah,
Sure. So I'm a session drummer. For a long time, I still play and I do a lot of music stuff. I toured for a lot, but this movie for me was something that I don't know if you play an instrument and you want more from your understanding of not only the genre of music that you prefer, but how it was unmistakably touched by something of this caliber. This is one of those things where uh, the musicians that are referenced in this movie are very much to say influential would be quite the understatement if I'm being honest. I mean, I wanted to see more. I wanted to know more about the culture at the time, specifically as the genre evolved. And this movie for me I saw it on a tour bus, so I felt like I was living it in the moment as it was happening, which was awesome. Um, Anything that you can do while you're doing the thing you love, making it go full circle is the key. And this was one of those moments for me in my career.
Cool.
Did you?
Yeah.
So you saw it on a tour bus, so you probably like saw it on DVD or something.
Yeah, I watched it in the. I don't know if you guys have ever been on a tour bus, but in the back of the tour bus, there's like a round couch, and a lot of very seedy things typically happen back there, mainly Xbox between cities if you're a PC. Um, but I watched it on a 65-inch flat screen in the back of a bus between Chicago and some podunk city in I think I was going the other way. I was going to like New York. Somewhere in between that leg is where I saw it for the first and second time. I watched it back to back.
How appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Uh, Perfect
So
context.
uh, I I try to introduce Mike to as many movies as I can because I like introducing everybody to movies, as I'm sure everybody already knows. And I think Mike once told me that he always appreciates it whenever he can show me something that I haven't seen because it's always great when that happens, and that has happened several times, like with RRR. And when he was telling me that I needed to watch this movie, and I was kind of like, yeah, yeah, well, it sounds great. We'll watch it. Cool, you know. And he was like, no, 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 we need to see it like tonight. And I was like, what? So he's like, we're gonna rent it on it. We tried to see if we could see it streaming somewhere for free, and we couldn't. And so I said, well, I'll just go see if maybe I could buy it or something. We'll see it this week sometime. And he goes, no, 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 it's for rent right there on Amazon. I was like, I haven't talked about this on the podcast, but Gil and Matt know this. That I don't like renting digitally. I just think it's like there's no
That's a
tangible
matter of
thing being.
principle.
You
Yeah,
might as
I'm
well
just
own the thing.
yeah,
Right.
and I'm just like, even if I have to pay more for it, if I get something tangible out of it that I can rewatch over and over, I just see that as better value. But Mike was insistent. He was like, "We're going to rent it tonight," and I was like, trying to, my cheapness was coming through because I was like, "We can say it'll be better. I'll buy it," and he said, "No, no, no, we're watching it tonight." And so he was very insistent, and I sat down, started watching it, and basically I really loved the movie. I like kind of like what Mike just said. My experience was basically like I just kept wanting more. I was every little scene seemed to have more and more value, and I was really enjoying every bit of it.
Yeah, and I felt like it was good for me to watch it fairly close to the recent Elvis movie because I felt like a lot
Yeah,
of that same period and some of the and this is like the other side of the black musician scene, like that Elvis was around, like the BB Kings, and so this was
Yep.
like another part of the country, and it so it was nice to have that filled in, those parts of history that maybe weren't touched on in the Elvis movie. So I think it was yeah, good timing, and it's a very rich like yeah, set of characters and plot points and just all the stories that go there. So it's just as a historical thing, it's definitely, and I'm a huge like music fan, and I've been in bands at least as a vocalist, but so for me it's also very fun, especially the whole inception of like between the blues and the birth of rock and roll and what led to today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool just for that alone, beyond just the qualities of the movie itself.
I think that there's a lot to praise in this movie, and like you bring up IMDb, and there's like the more like this stuff, and uh, the first thing that pops up is Dreamgirls, and
Yeah.
we've already had that discussion on this channel where I basically eviscerated that movie.
he's got his problems with that one.
Right, it's not
As
as
well you
good.
should, by the way.
Right, Jeffrey Wright is a generational talent. He is a great actor. He has a presence about him that is absolutely undeniable. He just carries scenes even when he's absolutely silent. I love that man. He is a great actor. uh, One thing that I also appreciated, and by the way, Mike, you brought up the cinematography. You probably know from spending time with Jason that I'm a cinematographer. So
Yes.
uh, I'm a nerd about this. And I got halfway through the movie and I'm like, did they shoot this on the Fuji Eterna 400 tungsten?
Right.
And then I looked it up and I was right. They shot it on the Fuji 400 tungsten, which sadly has now been discontinued for about a decade. Uh, but I actually felt compelled to write down all of my favorite film stocks that I've ever shot on during my career. And that came up number 5.
That's
But
awesome.
that's pretty high. Like, uh, they use that on all the night exterior scenes in Rescue Dawn. Like it's. Uh, I mean, I used it on both Jason and Gil will remember this. Lawan's movie Martyrs.
Hmm.
Uh, I love that film stock. It's just gorgeous. It still looks like film. Like it has a little bit of grain, but it just gives you so much leeway. It gives you so much to work with, and it looks so perfect for that era.
Right.
Making it a little warmer, but also like the pop of the greens that Fuji has always had. It's just, it's just pretty. It's just great to look at. Okay, rant
I
over
feel
for the
like
moment.
we should. Matt's usually the one who reminds us of this, and I once again didn't think about it. But for anyone who's never even heard of the movie, we should probably at least very briefly say that this is a movie about was it Chess Records? I believe is what it's called, right? Technically,
Mhm.
Yes.
yeah. Chess Records and the history of basically what would you say? Uh,
Well,
the start of blues and rock and roll and a lot of other vitally important music.
so briefly, Chess Records, the company, um, was the house, the wheelhouse for which all of these genres. I mean, if you go back to rock music and you talk to people of that, like the late 40s, early 50s of rock and the evolution of the genre, not to mention the transcendence of sharecropping music and essentially, let's call it what it is. In the South, people were just getting into segregation, and the post World War II era of music was very much in this country, still sharecropping tunes where people were still doing uh, modern slavery, right? And so segregation was a thing, and so the cultural appropriation and the transcendence from just songs that people would sing in their day-to-day workflow and the energy it conveyed was something that the world took on, and they absorbed it in a way that nobody ever could have calculated, and it birthed several different genres from blues to psychedelic rock to rock and roll. A lot of people would say that Chess Records was a central location for that in that time. There were other people doing it, but not to the same capacity, and certainly not with the same amount of depth as far as artists, talent, and diversity. Further, collaborations to that degree. At the time, they were pioneers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually curious because one thing when I looked it up online, I saw this with my wife Dan, and she's the one who does all the internet research.
That's
But
right.
apparently they were brothers,
Yes.
the Chess brothers, but apparently they downplay one of the brothers in the movie. It seems like they
Yeah.
mostly focus on the Adrian Brody character.
Which is Leonard. They showed Leonard's story, but Phil was the mastermind behind a lot of the A&R. So artist relations and the drafting part was done by Phil, and the recording sessions and all of the production stuff as Leonard, Adrian Boscus, as I called him. Um, the uh, the character that they portrayed was embodying both characters. And for the record, their estates, their families were very angry at the release of this movie because they didn't mention Phil at all.
For some reason on the on IMDb it shows an actor for Phil Chess. I don't know if maybe there was like a small moment where he appeared or.
Yeah, there were a couple of mentions of him as far as like his presence, but they didn't really show the development of these artists and the work that he did by putting them together.
I'm
So,
looking at
Yeah,
his picture on the IMDb right now. I don't even remember him in the movie at all.
I think
yeah,
he might have just showed up almost like in photos on set or something, like part of the production design.
Hmm.
Because what I liked about it thematically is that it just feels like because if you have two of them, for one thing, you already have all these musicians, all those
Stacked cast
characters,
already.
the stacked cast already, and if you and also I like the fact that Adrian Brody is the token white guy or like token Jew.
right.
I feel like that's it just made it very appropriate to have the reverse thing where it's like almost completely black cast and just this one Jew trying to like make everything commingle basically.
Yeah.
So I found that
Well,
very
you
interesting.
you do have Norman Reedus doing the DJ Qualls role, if you know, the hustle and flow guy. He's the guy just running
Right.
the machines, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But I just mean as far as leads, yeah,
Yeah, no,
like
I was
the
just
the
joking.
main roles. But
I just found that to be
Norman
an
yeah,
interesting
Norman
parallel.
Reedus is always going to be the Walking Dead guy from for me, but
What? No Boondock Saints?
I saw him and
no,
I saw Boondock Saints. He needed a pistol under his arm.
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, but
If he
yeah,
had a pistol under his
he's
arm, maybe
Daryl.
he could have
Come on,
calmed
he's
down some of
Daryl.
the fights that were happening.
yeah. So I guess we can move to rating it, so we can get into spoilers soon. But yeah, overall I agree with Matt. No, I wouldn't get to as much detail about the film stock, but it's a very good looking movie, and it was definitely appropriate, and the look of the movie, and yes, the cast is superb. Like Beyonce actually really surprised me. I thought it was like a really, not that I've seen her in anything else. I didn't see Dreamgirls. I don't
You didn't see
believe I've
Austin
seen
Powers
her.
3?
You know what? Yeah, and she was not great at that. So maybe maybe that's the
Well,
impression I have.
let's face it, it doesn't give her much to do.
Yeah,
No,
exactly. No, no,
but
but she's like solid. There's like not a false note here, and
I would
and
go
obviously,
even further. I think this movie. I think Jeffrey Wright, Gabrielle Union, Most Def, and Beyonce are like four like
bro,
powerhouse performances in this
bro,
movie. I don't even
yeah,
know. I mean, I'm used to seeing Most Def and enjoying what I'm seeing, but I mean, like this, all four of them are just like I don't even know what's happening. I'm like, again, same thing with Jeffrey Wright. I always like Jeffrey Wright. I don't know if I've ever not liked Jeffrey Wright in something, but I mean, especially when you start seeing the passage of time and you see
yeah.
how slowly gets older and older over like the 20 something years that the movie portrays. You know, it's like it's just well, you know, it is what it is. It's heartbreaking. It's like his performance is incredible.
yeah, no, no, for sure. And Adrian Brody, I do think he's underused to some degree. So I was happy to see him
You mean in
here
Hollywood?
and Hollywood in general,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Not in
also
this movie.
recently I started watching Winning Time on HBO, and he does like he plays Pat Riley, the coach of the Lakers.
Oh,
So
Yep.
it's that's also fun. You should watch that show, Matt, because it's got like more grain that you could ever wish for. And I'm not even sure if it was shot on film. It might be on digital shot, but it's kind of nuts, that show. But in any case, but yeah, like as far as like rating this movie, it's tough because I feel like I want to give it between the performances, the history. It's very, very well made. I want to give it an 8. It might like just be just shy of that. Like it would be like a 7.7, 7.8, but like a very, very warm 7 as far as my rating for it. And I would definitely recommend it for anybody who's a definitely music fan and just good acting in general. It's just for the performances.
Mm.
I feel like this is some of the best like ensemble black cast that I've ever seen. So that's that. Just that alone, I think, is worth the watch.
I I I think I'm gonna be somewhere in like the 7.5 category, but I mean, keep this in mind that you know I regarded perfectly adequate as 5. So I mean, 7.5 isn't me dissing on the movie. I am recommending the movie. The performances are great. The cinematography is great. One thing that bothered me is that I was listening to the dialogue and I felt like it was a mismatch of the writer hearing the vernacular and being able to translate it, and the writer basically being like a high school student writing cliche lines. And the high school student writing cliche lines started pretty early in the movie, and it kind of took me out of it. And it took a lot for me to get back into it, and then some of those lines came back, and I was just
Hmm.
kind of yeah, I'll make something of myself. Like yeah, that's something that you're gonna say, dear. Yeah, no, actually, I mean, I feel like the lines that were written for like for Muddy Waters and for Etta James felt more genuine. The A lot of the dialogue written for Adrian Brody just felt false to me. It didn't feel like a real person. And I don't think it was Adrian Brody's lack of acting talent. I think it was the writing. That said, yeah, I mean, I think it's about a 7.5 for me. Uh, Definitely watch it. I just have a little bit of a quibble with some of the writing. Uh,
I have a few issues with the movie overall myself, but I'll get into those later. Um, I um, I feel like um, when I'm, when I was watching the movie, it's as I kind of alluded to before, it surprised me that I liked it so much more than I actually expected I was going to. I actually expected to like it, but I was I was like I guess I could say I liked it about twice as much as I really thought I was going to, which is I mean I just
Damn.
really liked the movie a lot.
yeah,
That being said, like I said, I'll get into a few little nitpicky things I have with it later. But for me, especially when I think about the music itself and just how good it is, and the fact that like so many of the music performances were performed by the actors, which it just was really something kind of special. I felt the I would put it at a solid 8 for sure. There are times when I'm watching it and I feel like I should say 9, but
Damn.
overall I'd say 8.
all right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What
Mike,
about
do you have
you,
any
Mike?
feelings about where you would put it on a 1 to 10 scale?
Sure. Okay. So if I'm going as there's two sides to the coin. Briefly, as a musician who also knows a bit about the individual artists and their battles and their stories, if you will, the the inaccuracies in the overall timeline as well as the events that took place are the only things that I guess subtract from my overall rating of the movie. But as a moviegoer who is also a musician, the story is something that could be considered captivating because, like you said, Jason, the uh, the artists in that movie, like Mos Def and Beyonce, performed their role. They performed those parts, and the Howling Wolf part was an inclusive. It was inclusive of that. So that in and of itself was just another reason why. I mean, if for nothing else than the soundtrack, I'd give it like a. I'd probably right with you guys somewhere in the 7 to 8 range because it had its flaws. And Matt, I'll side with you in that there were some lines in the writing for Adrian Brody's character that were just like, dude, you would never say some shit like that in the middle of Chicago to anybody black. And the whole thing was just there were some moments as a guy who has witnessed that. Like I've played shows in the South that look like Blues Brothers stages with chain link fences in front of the bar. I've played venues like that. So like I've survived stuff like that, but there were some references there like we'll get into that later that I was conflicted with. But overall, yeah, somewhere in that range. I mean, I really like the movie and I'm glad for the record that I'm 2 for 2. Um with
Um, so we don't always go over this, but I just wanted to ask you guys in case anybody else looked it up and saw anything. I was looking, the director, Darnell Martin, she has a lot of credits as a director, but it's mostly all television. And I myself have not really seen much of it, maybe a few episodes of stuff here and there, but certainly not enough to say that I'm familiar with her body of work. I don't know if you guys have, but I don't really have any opinion on her other stuff other than just to say that I liked this movie a lot.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I guess last thing I would say about as far as directing style is is maybe a slight flaw from my point of view is that it is for the most part it's just going through the motions as far as the approach to it, which I felt like it didn't bother me as much with this movie because I felt like the characters and the story and the history was so rich that it's just one of those movies that you don't want to mess with. You don't want to start doing a lot of like movie tricks and
Boz
movie
Lerman.
techniques. Yeah, like Baz
Yeah.
Luhrmann type of stuff. Like you just want to the story to kind of tell itself in a way that's why it sort of works for me. But yes, I'm sure that I've also some of the yeah the dialogue and surprisingly even though it's under 2 hours I felt like the pacing was like the wasn't always like spot on at points, which that's actually says something for a movie that's under 2 hours to feel like it's a bit on too slow. But yeah, but overall, it's those are the main things that I would say like bring it down slightly for me. But yeah, it's a very enjoyable movie watching experience for sure.
Uh, I
Um,
would actually be interested to dive into, I already praised the choice of shooting it on that specific Fuji stock, but I mean, it is one of those things where, okay, aging myself, but I am younger than you two, so I don't know about Mike, but there was a little piece in the back of my mind that I know that I was shooting on those foam stocks more than 10 years ago, and Fuji was always like 30% cheaper, and I thought that you know you know damn, this is the perfect way for this movie to look, but it's always kind of in the back of my head, if it's not somebody like Werner Herzog or a movie like Into the Wild where they chose Fuji. There's a little thing running through my head of like, did they just pick it because it was cheaper, or did they pick it for aesthetic reasons? And because this director doesn't really have that much of a track record, and because it was kind of paint by numbers, looking back, I'm not convinced that she chose the film stock on the basis of it being the right choice, but just on the basis of it being pragmatic.
Mm.
I guess it's just worked out.
Yeah,
Happy accidents, Bob Ross style.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care all that much, but it's just a thought that a nerd has from time to time.
Yeah. That's why you're
But
an integral part of the show.
yeah,
um, cool. I guess should we get into spoilers or anything else
Yeah,
as far
let's
as
do that.
okay, so spoilers. Jason, did you said something about things that bother you or get
Oh,
into?
well, first off, just because we were just talking about it, let me just go ahead and throw this out there. I wanted to mention one or two positive things that I thought she did in terms of directing this thing. Not like like you said, it's not super noticeable. Not like whatever. I think that, like you said, the choice was the right choice to um, just kind of film the story unfolding pretty naturally. But I just as a positive note, I really liked a couple of the things they did with the camera, specifically when they started. They I feel like there's a visual shift in the way that they are recording, or the way that they're shooting the scenes of the guys recording their music, like Muddy and well, actually all of the guys that Chuck Berry and all of them, the first four or five guys they have in there um, recording, I feel like they're kind of doing it one way, and then when Etta James shows up, especially in the one where where Adrian Brody's in there with her and he kind of pisses her off to get the performance that he wants,
Yep.
the camera's kind of moving around with him and kind of like, I mean, I don't want to say spinning because that implies a lot of movement, but it's kind of flowing around her in a way that they were not doing with the other guys. I just felt like they probably made a conscious choice to just film her recording stuff a little bit different than the other guys, um, which I thought was nice. It really kind of helped distinguish that phase of the story and that phase of the movie a little better. But one of my favorite things that she did, and I was I had forgotten about it until we kind of did a little last minute rewatch right now, but right before recording this. But as you said, there's not much to the way in which this is filmed. Visually, it's more or less just letting the story unfold. It's cutting into inserts when it's appropriate to do so, and so on and so forth. And it's giving you coverage, and it's doing what it needs to do. But there is there's moments when Adrian Brody is starting to have a sort of relationship with Beyonce, and they have the scene around the pool table. They have the scene at the little diner table or dinner table, whatever, the little thing after he tries to introduce her to her father or something like that. They have scenes that are just the two of them throughout their story, and they don't do this. But in the scene where she's, basically dying on her living room floor, he comes over. He is having an affair. It is his anniversary night. Um, he comes over, and as soon as he picks her up and they're alone together, and he's trying to keep her awake so that she doesn't go into a coma and die, they are that scene. As soon as he gets close to her, the camera doesn't let you get out. It's like locked in on not super close ups, like you can see their foreheads, but it's close. That even the coverage, it's not like it's a single shot or anything. It covers back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but it never cuts back out into a wide. They are like stuck together in this tight, intimate moment. And I really just really appreciated that, because I don't think there's another moment in the movie where they do that. So I think it was definitely a very, very conscious choice. And I thought it
Yeah,
worked well.
that's a good point.
But anyway, that's all I had about directing. You were talking about my criticisms. I mean, I don't have much. It's mostly nitpicky, but like personally, I would have liked a little bit more most def. I thought like I think there's a lot of history there. I could have used a little more. Um, I I also feel like this is, how can I say this? I don't want to sound mean when I say this, but um, I don't know how you guys feel about Adrian Brody as an actor in general. I feel like his performances are all over the spectrum based on how well he was cast for the role.
Yeah.
Like there are times like the pianist where he is like amazing, you know, and there's times in very flawed movies where I thought he gave an okay performance, like in The Village and stuff. Um, and then there's times like in Predators, where if you haven't seen that, I mean, like that movie, he bulked up like a action star. He is cut out of stone in that movie. I appreciate his dedication so much, but he is horribly miscast. Like it's so bad. And then like the probably the worst miscasting of him ever was in King Kong. I thought that was a really bad idea for them to put him in that role. But like I said, there are times where I absolutely love him and times where I'm like, what are you doing in this movie? And this, I think, I think he was great in this movie. But I have to say that even though I think he was great in this movie, I think he's the weakest thing in most of the scenes he's in. I mean, it's not his fault. He's surrounded by phenomenal performances. But if I have to call out something, that's what I'm going to call out, because it's like there's times where I'm
Mhm.
just like you. I mean, you guys said it already. There's stuff that Jeffrey Wright does without even uttering a word, and he's his presence is there. I mean, and it's just and they have so many scenes together, and it's kind of rough probably, but
Yeah,
that's the way it is. I think that he's got some of the scenes where I kind of I'm not so super keyed in are because of Adrian Brody.
bringing that up, I was just kind of thinking about this. Yeah, because it was brought up at the beginning of the movie that being a Jew wasn't exactly popular at the
Oh yeah.
time either, and that was just kind of lost uh, in the writing throughout the course of the movie.
Are you saying that you would
And
have liked to have seen more moments where he faced adversity because of his ethnicity?
well, I mean, just at least keep that in your back pocket. I mean, it's. I was reminded of Thomas Sowell when he was asked, "What do the Jews need to do to stop being hated?" And he responded in one word. He just said, "Fail." The Jews just need to fail. and then they'll stop being hated. And yeah, I mean, there's there is a missed opportunity in this movie uh, that is the Jewish experience throughout the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Uh, Probably the Jewish experience now. Gil, you can probably speak to this better than I can, but
Well, if anything,
uh,
definitely Spielberg has gone through, it seems like, more anti-Semitism than Adrian Brody did in this movie.
right, yeah, exactly.
That's
The
fair.
Fablemans. Although apparently there's a lot of inaccuracies in the Fablemans based on some of the eyewitness testimony from his high school friends.
Oh,
But in any case, apparently, like, maybe he didn't have a girlfriend really, like, in the movie, and maybe the anti-Semitism, he was kind of like blowing that up a bit. But in any case, it's fine. But I'm
you
sure it
know what?
exists.
If I ever get to make a autobiographical, movie about my life, I'll probably lie and say that I had girlfriends in high school too.
Yeah, for sure. Before the yeah, any racism or anything like that. That's more important. But yeah,
Oh
it's
no,
I
I'll
actually
talk. I'll talk that up too. I'm gonna be like
okay,
talk
okay.
about all my half Mexican oppression.
Exactly. That's like actually a good segue to that, because I was as I was watching the movie, I was like, is Adrian Brody even Jewish, or is he just being like cast because, like, as Jewish because he's got a big nose? But apparently he's like a half Jewish or a quarter Jew or something, like on one side, like I think his mother or grandmother is like a Polish Jew or something.
Yeah.
But which I
Wait,
guess that's why.
I don't want to sound racist here, but wait, you're telling me that Toucan Sam is not fully Jewish? That's amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
Dude, that was some of the things we were talking about earlier in the recap. Adrian Boscus is what I call him.
Yeah,
It's the profile is real.
yeah.
How do you like that? I mean, props to you. It casts its own shadow. I don't know. Uh,
I had to look up Toucan Sam.
Follow your
But
nose.
I don't get all
yeah,
your
just follow your
American
nose.
references.
We are
Yeah.
gonna get
That's terrible.
canceled
Oh,
I
it's
shouldn't
from
have said
so
that.
Kellogg's.
hard.
Yeah, I didn't grow up in the
It's
U.S.,
Fruit
so not
Loops.
as
It's
many.
the toucan.
Uh, oh
That's
yeah, I didn't grow up eating Fruit Loops. That's
neither did I.
There you
um.
go.
But in any case, but I'll accept the criticism that Adrian Brody is not the strongest performance in the movie. But I for some reason I just really like him. I think he's
Yeah.
kind of like this movie. It's just he's very serviceable. I think he
Oh yeah,
suits the role, and he rises to the occasion when he needs to. I think some of the acting in those scenes where, like you said, he directs her to try to get a rise out
yeah.
of her. The scenes with Beyonce in general, their chemistry was just very good.
Really good.
And I
Yeah,
do think it's just an issue that when he's with Jeffrey Wright,
Yeah.
it's what are you gonna do? Like the
Kind of
guy's like
overshadowed.
the
yeah.
guy's
No,
like made of steel. Like he's just like
I,
so much like is oozing from him. You
yeah.
can't compete with that.
Yeah,
After saying what I said,
you
it's
need to
important
get
that I
Anthony
clarify.
Hopkins in the room.
Yeah, yeah. No, I just wanted to clarify. Like, I mean, I do think I agree with Gil that in terms of Hollywood, I think he's underused. I just think that there have been throughout his career, he's been miscast and misused, or given terrible scripts, and there's some bad performances out there, and I'm not even necessarily saying I would blame it on him, but it's frustrating to me because when you see how good he can be, it's like, oh man. And I do think this is one of the better performances of his I've seen. I liked him in this movie a lot. I just, like you said, overshadowed.
Yeah, I guess I should correct myself to say that he's not underused, he's just misused. It sounds like I just haven't
That might
seen
be
a lot of
better.
these
Yeah.
performances. Yeah. But he's just got a very good, interesting face, and if you make it work for you, if you cast him correctly, he brings like an interesting angle, to
But you
the
know what I
to the
liked
movie.
about him in this movie? And you guys, if you, I'm trying to think of all the movies I've seen him in, and I'm trying to think if I've seen this before or not. I don't know, but there's he's this character is so complex because he's simultaneously responsible for being a super key component of all this great music, great influential music that laid the foundation for the greatest music ever made, you know, and that's the kind of character he's playing, and that's the history of his character. But he's kind of a scumbag too, you know? And I'm trying to think if I've seen Adrian Brody play scumbag before. I mean, I'm trying to think of all the roles I've seen him in it. I don't think I've seen him play scumbag before. And I think he was really good at channeling that. Like, he's nice. He puts his arm around his guy, and then 5 minutes later he's like screwing him over with the details on the in the contracts and stuff.
Yeah. That's another point of criticism is I felt like his character is it came a bit too quickly that from owning just a nightclub of sorts that he all of a sudden became an expert on like black music and was like, oh, I can like there's no you don't get into the origin of like how why is he like some sort of expert, like why is he the channel through which all this could funnel, like why was he the connecting tissue. I felt like that's part of what wasn't explored too much. And also I will say for the musicians themselves, I think there's a little bit with Chuck Berry, some of the influences that he had to get to where he was, that the whole thing about him, they thought he was going to be a white guy, that one
Yeah,
venue, and it was like,
yeah,
no, but you can't perform here. So I felt like with Chuck Berry there was a bit of that, but not as much with Muddy Waters and Etta James. As far as like it would have been nice to get into some of the origins of how that music came about and those influences. I felt like.
right.
He also kind of died incredibly unceremoniously
Who,
toward
Adrian
the end.
Brody?
Yeah.
Oh, I liked his death a lot.
Apparently in real life it was like a couple months later
It
after
was
it
months
closed
after, in
down.
fact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, but you gotta use it's a visual
compress.
medium. You gotta show
Yeah,
the
epic
Right.
the
montage, though,
thematic
right?
storytelling within the scene.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where, like, this is one of your most important characters. Like, absolutely one of your most important characters. And you just have him pull off to the side of the road and, like, oh, he had a heart attack. I,
Yeah, but it's like
I,
it's symbolic of the fact that he couldn't survive without his baby. And by
I
that, of
also
course, I'm
felt,
talking about his
I
record
also
company,
felt
not
like that was a
Not Etta
stretch.
James.
not Etta James.
Well, that's also one of the reasons why I hate voiceover, unless you can really justify it. Like, oh, he died of a heart attack. Like,
This coming
well,
from the guy defending the Thin Red Line?
Yeah.
that's the movie where you can defend it. But
No, you can't.
I,
Wait, I'm
but
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hold on, Matt. I feel like I'm gonna forget this, but I don't say this. um, I did write down a note about Cedric the Entertainer and his narration and his character he plays and everything, just because I wanted to say this, and nobody has to agree with me. That's fine. But the I just thought that he did a really great job as the narrator. Um, but what struck me, what jumped out at me, was how this movie uses him as a character in the movie and as the narrator for all the other characters and what's going on. Not to say in any way that that's a revolutionary thing. There's many movies that have done that in the past, but the manner in which they did it, I just really liked because it jumped out at me and made me think about my probably my biggest or second biggest criticism of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That movie I really love that movie, and yet somehow I don't get how Quentin thought it was a good idea to have one narrator for the first half of the movie and then an entirely different narrator for the last half of the movie, where the last half of the movie was narrated by a character that we're seeing earlier on in the movie who's not even an important character. Like it's so bizarrely weird, and it doesn't make sense. And the first thing I thought of, or maybe it was my friend who said this to me, was this. If everyone remembers that movie, there's a scene at like the Playboy Mansion or something like that, and I can't remember that actor's name, but the guy from Band of Brothers, he's like awesome actor. Um, he's
Oh,
playing
yeah.
Steve McQueen in the movie, and he has this great scene where he's not narrating, but he's kind of narrating because he's got a girl next to him, and he's explaining in a very narrator sort of way the dynamic between Sharon Tate and Polanski and their friend, you know,
Mm.
and he's doing all that, and he's telling the history of the story and whatever. And my friend told me when we were talking about the narration, he goes, "Why didn't he have that guy narrate the whole movie as Steve McQueen? I mean, what better figure could you have from that era talk about a movie called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?" He could have had him do the whole movie and it would have been amazing. And that's what I was thinking about when I saw this, because Cedric is playing a pivotal character. And by the very end, when you get to the very end of the movie, you see why it's so appropriate that his character is the one telling the story, because he ends up buying the studio and everything, you know, and how he ends up becoming such a fixture in the music industry and everything like that. So it's like it starts out and it's kind of odd, but it's like he's doing a good job, and by the end it becomes really appropriate. And I don't know, I mean, none of that defends the fact that it's narration in the first place, like Matt was complaining about, because I often complain about that too. uh, but but yeah, there's something about this movie and what it did with Cedric the Entertainer that I was like, see how good that worked? Why didn't they do that in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
It was Damian Lewis was
Thank you,
the
Damian Lewis, great actor.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, I mean, to an extent, I agree. It's just there was no gravity to his death. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just like I I didn't feel anything,
Hmm.
and I mean, there's a certain component that maybe I'm just a cold-hearted asshole and I never feel anything ever, but I don't know. I cry at the end of 1917 every time I watch it. I cry at the end of hell, I cry at the end of Armageddon every time I watch it. So
Well,
But
I
here's the
isn't
test.
Power,
Okay.
it isn't it
the
part
power of
of
a good
the
soundtrack.
the isn't it like part of it is that his character is very imperfect, like he's kind of like an anti-hero of sorts, so it's not as if you kind of feel like he had it coming, you know,
Yeah,
in some sort of way. It's like he
he
played
did
his
screw them
part.
over pretty bad.
Yeah, he played
Yeah,
his part in history, and he kind of gets his in the end. And maybe there's some poetic justice that Etta James, that who looked like she's not going to survive till the end of the movie, ends up surviving till I think she just died like in the last decade or so, like in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
early 2000s. So the fact that there's that some of them, like, were able to live a good life and he didn't, is I don't know, to some degree, because he did have a lot of success on their backs in a way, which
yeah,
is often the case with record companies and all
That part
that.
was very accurate.
yeah,
As far as the music business story goes, right? But I feel like there were several pivotal moments where his character, like he literally said that he was fucking him. And then the scene where Chuck Berry's character, and to your point, Jason, his presence wasn't felt because he was in prison for a lot of the stuff.
Oh
He
yeah,
did
no,
he did
that's why I would
legit
have loved
jail
to have
time
seen
for that.
more.
Yeah, but I mean, that was like if they would have taken a little bit more time, to Matt's point, to build the depth behind a lot of these characters, you would have seen that Muddy Waters' character and his overlap with Columbus Short, the Lil Walter character, which by the way was he acted his ass off for that role.
Mm.
But I feel like the depth in their relationship would have exposed the fact that later in the movie when Lil Walter dies, spoiler, um, he felt ownership in that. That provided more depth to Muddy Waters' character. But Adrian Brody's character, to your point, Gil, like he acted out that shady record label executive who was like, "Oh, I'm guilty. I'm the reason why." Like that was accurate. I felt that to my soul because survived that stuff to a certain capacity.
It's kind of interesting. Like I just had this thought. Like to a certain extent, isn't this kind of a good movie to be an exemplar of why we should stop bitching about movies having too long of run times, and maybe we should just have an intermission and just let them run as long as they need to run?
Oh yeah,
Well,
I
I think
mean,
that anyone who's ever listened to our podcast probably knows that we're very pro intermissions.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think it all depends because I mean, you could take the story and make it into a limited 8 episode series or something,
Oh,
and get
sure.
more in depth. But I feel like for a movie, it should be just around the 2 hour movie, and I actually said some of the pacing was a little slow because it's too many characters, so it would be tough. I wonder if they've had some cut scenes that might have given more depth to it, and if that would have made the movie better, or if that would have made the pacing even slower than it already was. So it's tough to it's a tough call to make. They chose to really do this whole ensemble with all these various characters, and it's not easy to get
Yeah.
very very in depth on all every specific character. That's why
Yeah.
they crammed Adrian Brody into one brother,
Yeah.
basically.
I mean, I think what you're saying, Gil. I mean, it's like it's an unfortunate matter of timing because nowadays someone doing this probably would get a deal with HBO or Showtime or something like that and do like an 8 part, 1 hour episode, 8 part miniseries or something like that. Because we're living in a golden age of miniseries now with primetime, or not primetime, premium television and stuff like that. But
right.
I mean,
Prestige,
even
prestige
even
TV.
though, of course,
Worldwide.
even though HBO was obviously very much a thing in 2008, it certainly wasn't super common for them to just be handing out miniseries left and right like they are now.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think the purpose of movies is to tell a story concisely. I don't mind if a movie goes into like between 2 to 3 hours. I definitely think 3 hours needs to be the unspoken max for movies. Like at that point, just make it a miniseries or a two-parter or whatever.
Right. Right.
But um, but but yes, I can see a version of this movie that would be a more epic version that's like longer, and maybe you open it up more. But again, it's tough. It's you really need to like nail that. Yeah, to
yeah,
like not make it feel a bit too stretched out, like the
uh,
Elvis movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Good God.
Matt, earlier you were mentioning how uh, you are a heartless individual and that you didn't feel anything for Adrian Brody. I just was curious because I thought this would, being that it's in the same movie, I thought it would be a really good, test kind of thing. Very telling situation. But did you did you feel anything when little Walter dies? Because I think that scene's incredible.
Yeah. yeah, that hit me.
He's
Um,
alive.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
alive.
that
Um,
was not a pleasant scene for me to watch, despite what a lot of people on my social media would claim about me. Uh, but yeah, no, that
I wanted to mention because
was
I wrote a note down about Jeffrey Wright's choice, or maybe the director's choice, or both of their choice. I don't know, whatever. But the way he plays, I mean, first of all, you get the moment, the private moment that he has with what's Gabrielle Union's name in this movie? It's like
I, all I can think about when I see Gabrielle Union is how fucking gorgeous that woman is.
oh, of
Her name
course,
was Geneva Wade in the movie.
Geneva. Geneva. I thought
Yeah,
it was something with a yeah, Geneva. He has his private moment with Geneva, which is super appropriate for their their little three-way dynamic that they have in their little family there,
yeah,
and
like
it's so
convention.
sad. And then all of a sudden, then Jeffrey Wright shows up,
Mhm.
and he when he 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 like kind of leans down and kisses his cheek, and they pull the body away, and there's this moment where you can see that he's going through something, but he just doesn't want her to see it,
Yeah,
because he's that kind of a man. He doesn't want her to see him emotional, even though his best friend in the world just died, and someone that they were both super close to. But I love what they do is that I know people do this in real life, especially a lot of people who are like that. But he's talking to the two mortician people, the people who are taking the body away. You know, he's
hmm
asking that he's like stepping out of their way, and he's making a point to communicate with them, even though they're not even talking to him. He's like, oh, let me get here, yeah, let me get the door, and he's like, thank you so much, guys, thanks. He's like he's saying things so that he doesn't express himself, and then as soon as they leave, he starts going into problem solving mode to once again keep his emotions in check, and he's like, I think it's a good idea that we buy him a brand new suit. We got to get him a good coffin. He's like telling his girl stuff, that chore list stuff, to like occupy his mind, and then he runs up the stairs to be by himself and then just falls apart.
Yeah.
yeah. I remember this interview with Jeffrey Wright. I forget how long ago it was, but he was one of the lead actors in Angels in America,
Oh yeah.
the miniseries.
Yeah.
And something that he brought up was when you're shooting a movie. Uh, no, what he said was when you're shooting a miniseries, they expect you to have it by the third take. When you're shooting a movie, you are expected to have your lines down by the third take, uh,
Hmm.
which kind of struck me as weird because you, me, and Gil have only shot low budget movies. Um, though I mean, some of them have been shot digitally, so just keep rolling. But yeah, fuck it. Um,
Full send.
but the thing that sticks out to me about Jeffrey Wright is that I y'all know that I have experience both in theater and in cinema. I've been on stage, and I know a lot of actors and actresses who are stage actors. And the funny thing is, like I keep coming back to this, that it's a lot easier to get a stage actor who is way too big, way too emotive, way too uh like past the
Expressive.
butter and everything, expressive, and dial that down than it is to get somebody who is too quiet too subtle and get that person to be more emotive. And Jeffrey Wright has always struck me as this guy who has something brewing inside of him all the time.
Hmm.
He's just got this emotive instinct inside of him all the time. He's always ready to shout and to scream and to show the world exactly what's helping, what's brewing inside of him, in the depths of his stomach. But he just has the control to bury that, and he can emote it in a whisper, and it's fucking brilliant every time he does it. I mean, like the moment in Westworld where he just had that line, "This doesn't look like anything to me," is crestfalling. Like it just smacks you in the fucking face, and he didn't emote at all. He just
Yeah.
said the line, but there was something brewing inside of him. The guy is a fucking genius.
He's pretty great.
Uh, Rant over. Go ahead. You know.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, I will say also, I really like the Howling Wolf little moment there with this Iman Walker. I've
Yes.
always liked that guy. Like, it's just something about like he should always show up in the movie just for 10 minutes and just steal a
Dude,
few scenes, and
there
I
then
was
think
leave.
his
just so
the
much
first
power there.
yeah, I like the first scene with him when it's outside the record studio, and um it just it makes it so clear to the audience, in case they weren't quite sure, that even though Adrian Brody, even though Chess has done a lot for these guys, and he's being, I guess you could air quotes say, generous in a sense, that there should be no question after that moment that he is pimping his artists, you
Right.
know, like, and that's not to say that he's the only one. That was pretty much, from what I can tell from every single musician biopic that has ever been made, it seems to be fairly common practice throughout the ages. But it doesn't change the fact that that's what he's doing. Like, he might be doing it in a fairly nice way, but like, he's more or less getting rich off of their music, and he's putting a bunch of money back into the studio. And someone who now is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and someone who's in the who's like the Muddy Waters, this legendary musician, comes to him and says, "I got $200 to my name." And this is late in his career, when he's been with this guy helping him with this business for so long, and that scene specifically, though, the one I was talking about, is so great, because they're talking about the cars, and he's got the flashy car, and the other guy's got the beat up truck, and he Adrian Brody offers him money, he turns it down, and what is it? Jeffrey Wright kind of, like, as he's driving away, kind of talks some shit. He's like, I ain't. What does he say? Something like that he doesn't own him, or something like whatever he says. And then 2 seconds later, turns to Adrian Brody and is like asking for a handout to pay his
Right.
rent, or something like that. I mean, like, this guy owns them. Like, I mean, he totally owns them.
Well, and there are several instances in the film where, like, there are, speaking to that point, that was one of the scenes that I talked about as one of the most impactful for me. Like, it resonated. There were several instances where Howlin' Wolf's character plays pivotal roles in the movie. That was one of them, where he said, "I own this truck. It don't own me,"
Mm,
and that was indicative of black culture at the time, remembering that segregation and cultural appropriation were things that were, I mean, later in the movie when Mos Def was plagiarized for the Beach Boys Surfing USA, which was a thing, Howlin' Wolf did a lot of music that was innovative. Um, Willie Dixon, who is Cedric's character, wrote over 500 songs in his career during that period of time, and a lot of that stuff, like he sued a couple of different heavy hitters and won
Said Led Zeppelin in
because
the credits.
yeah, because that was his content. And so cultural appropriation being what it is, intellectual property being what it is, these guys were ahead of that in a sense that nobody had ever done that before. So for it to be blatant as it was something that they had to reference. And so, in the beginning, when you're introduced to Howlin' Wolf, it's understood that he is, ironically, a lone wolf, in that this is mine. You won't take from it. You'll pay me what you owe me, is exactly what he said. And then to your point, Jason, Muddy Waters' character was like, "Look at this motherfucker!" Like, and then
Yeah.
asked Adrian Brody's character, "Hey man, I got to pay some bills." And then later, when Lil Walter dies, he's asking Adrian Brody for a handout, and then Howlin' Wolf says, "As long as you let him treat you like a boy, he'll treat you like a boy." Which in our culture, for the record, I'm a gray kid. For those who don't know me, it's a very derogatory term. And so, two black men standing in front of a Jewish guy in the beginning of this now predominant industry. Like I've worked for Jimmy Iovine, and please don't come after me if you're listening to this, but there are moments where that is very relevant, and that was one of them when Howlin' Wolf throws the money on the floor and walks out of the room. That is what every independent artist strives to be. Yeah, you'll pay me what you owe me, but I'm going to go about my business because this is mine. And so in that time, they were pioneering that. And I feel like that dynamic was one of the things that they got right in this movie.
Yeah, I love all the scenes with him. He's great.
Dude,
So that's awesome. Yeah, yeah, that's a lot to digest.
Yeah, it definitely feels like because a lot of this music was in its infancy, and the whole thing of the whole attraction to the rock star part, the whole women, the things that Mos Def does there, like the Chuck Berry character, and
yeah,
Muddy Waters too. The fact that you
Are
can't
you referring to
really,
the
it's
backseat foursomes?
yeah, the back seat, and then and then of course like the Muddy Waters, because recently there was like a Bill Maher podcast where he spoke to this like rock star from the 80s or something, this musician. He said like, so uh how, like how difficult it is to stay loyal in a relationship when you're a rock star, and he basically tells him like it's impossible. There's just no way. So I'm just thinking like that and the money part. It feels like there's this whole. It touches on this part of the culture that black people of that time didn't know how to take pride in what they create and take ownership of it, and
well,
get their own, and how that's evolved over the years. And you have someone like Beyonce that's acting in the movie and is a huge superstar. um, and all these black artists that over the years have definitely came and to their deserving place. It's nice because there's a lot of this goes back to the Elvis thing, that then someone
right.
like Elvis comes along and just
Cultural
steals their whole
appropriation.
repertoire. Yeah, and then whether it's the Beach Boys or Zeppelin, but that's like little things like a song here, a song there. That usually happens in music in general.
Yeah.
But definitely Elvis, and definitely, there's like all throughout history, you have all these white people that will take music that starts out as black music, and then they become superstars because like all of a sudden it's more it's more vanilla. It's more like acceptable to
Right.
other white people or like certain segments of the population. So that's what's interesting about the history of what this movie shows is that they didn't know what they were doing. Like the Muddy Waters character, like he had no clue that he could be a superstar. Like you're playing your music, you have no idea that anybody would ever care about it. But it's so it only makes sense that they would mess up, they would make these mistakes and growing pains of sorts.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I still maintain that the two biggest problems with the Elvis movie were the garish digital cinematography and Tom Hanks should just never try to do accents. Like, just
No.
never. Like, I mean, I love Tom Hanks, but uh, just stop it. Stop
Well,
trying to do accents.
he crushed Forrest Gump, though. I mean,
Yeah,
At
that's
least
true.
do
Maybe do it
accents
without a fat
adjacent
suit
to
or
what your real
right.
voice is. But yeah, uh, I left Croatia and I changed plane many times. Fuck you. No, it just doesn't
Tell me
work.
how you really feel, sir.
Um,
um,
yeah, no, I mean, I think Bill's striking a chord here, and that pun was not intended, but I'm fully aware of what I just threw out there. So, fuck it.
I like
Go
that
ahead.
though. It was like
Yeah,
a G minor 7.
right.
I just
I,
I feel
I can't read music, so yeah.
cool.
that's funny.
No, but
I
it's
feel
yeah.
I feel
Mhm.
that though. Like one of the things though, we're talking about braving new territory, right? So another one of the most powerful scenes I think in that movie, and Jason, we were talking about this in the brief recap, was when Lil Walter is assaulted by the police.
Mhm.
Understand that in that scene, at that moment, he had the #1 song on Billboard, and he's getting his
Mm,
face smashed into a Cadillac. Further,
yeah,
the one time that Muddy's character has the ability to defend him, he lets it slide, and it's noted by Lil Walter when he quits, right? Like you could
yeah,
take a note from Wolf when it comes to loyalty, and that was huge because it was a an unwritten understanding at that point. And Gil, you spoke earlier that the musicians of that genre, like black, white, otherwise, they had no idea what they were doing as far as laying the groundwork for the music and the movements that they were inspiring. Like, look at the Rolling Stones. I love how they cast that as like
yeah,
some awkward kids coming in and saying they were huge fans. In fact, their name came from one of Muddy's songs. And so one of those instances where they had no idea. Like, think about this. This genre gave birth to one of the other explosions in music. When you talk about Howlin' Wolf and his genre, the influence he had on psychedelic rock, like Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead attribute their sound to Howlin' Wolf and several other artists that were pioneers at the time. The groundwork that Chuck Berry laid inspired this dude by the name of Jimi Hendrix. I don't know if you guys heard of him, but
I think I might have at one point.
yeah. So I mean, to your
And
I
point,
Michael J. Fox.
yeah,
Oh, we can't forget that. Come on.
okay.
cannot.
Yeah,
But that's my
Wait,
not,
point.
that was his brother or his cousin Marvin though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
now listen to this.
Right. Right. But I feel like when we're talking about the depth of this whole concept, right? Like you got the whole like if you run down the list, like Willie Dixon over 500 hits, Lil Walter, the first and only harmonica player to be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, specifically for harmonica. Like
Hmm.
he pioneers, you know, but at the same time, ridiculously pimped by the people who are making money behind the scenes, who also don't know how to manage money. So uh, earlier in the episode, we were talking about how I think it was Matt. Matt, I think you mentioned the the glance over the fact that Adrian's character was a Polish Jew post
Hmm.
World War II. But I feel like the collaboration of two very, very belittled uh, ethnic groups coming together to make history to this magnitude is something that as a as a kid, not only as a musician but as a mixed kid who really had issues with identifying, because I played punk rock music early on, and that's what got me into touring and doing the session work. So like as a
Hmm.
black kid, there were only a handful of bands that had black musicians in them in that genre, and we played and we did all right as far as like charting that territory. But there are a laundry list of artists who never survived that. And the other dynamic that wasn't really touched on yet in our conversation was the presence of drugs like heroin and alcohol in this story, in this genre, and in that time period that really changed the trajectory for a lot of these people's careers. So not only do you have superstardom for somebody who was once a sharecropper, but you got the presence of drugs and the ease of use of those drugs as like a nonchalant, we're doing this
Hmm.
type thing. And then you got Edda's character, who they played and portrayed as a junkie for all intents and purposes, but navigating all of that at the same time while getting pimped by a record label. That was it. Just it resonates, you know.
Yeah, I can't say that I understand 100%, but I do understand to a certain extent.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
and maybe that's a good thing that they played that whole Jewish black connection more in a subtle way, not to play it too much because it's been done several times. The whole
Sure.
idea of that at that period, like they're kind of like in similar boats, not completely, but in certain aspects. So there was some sort of like camaraderie between them, but still like the Jews still fuck them. Yeah. So what are you gonna do? It's like they still take care of themselves. But yeah, no, but it's understandable. I think it's very understandable that all those growing pains would be there, and we have to owe all the music we listen to now to these people. So it's yeah, that's why it's very good watch just for that alone. Like I want to watch a documentary about this stuff now.
yeah. Well, I
So
Right.
mean, I think what it all comes down to is that the first people who bust through the door are always going to get bloody,
Sure.
and these were the first people who busted through the door. These were the people who took the risk, and this is why risks work. This is why capitalism works. This is why free markets work. People bust through the fucking door and they don't know what's on the other side, but they are so confident in what they're hearing, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing in their lives at the moment that, yeah, yeah, I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to bust through that fucking door and I am going to wave this in your fucking face. And you can take it or leave it, but I'm going to bet that you're going to take it.
or at least they did at the time. Yeah,
Right,
maybe 10, 20 years earlier it would have been an issue.
right.
Because that's
That's
the
how
biggest thing is like all these like performers became like #1 hits and stuff. That wasn't always like
right.
accepted. That was the
Yeah, I
whole
mean, but this is how progress happens.
yeah
Uh, it is the you know the what square bolts in the round holes. It's the freaking maniacs who think like society is wrong. I'm just gonna do this and show them that they're wrong. And it is so good that society has to admit that it's wrong. I mean, like you're talking about like the 1940s when I mean, what this is 20 years prior to the civil rights movement, but you hear a black guy playing the guitar and singing, and suddenly it's just like I don't give a flying fuck that this guy's black. He's just better. I mean,
yeah
my
yeah
dad, my dad just turned 86 today. Well, this week. I mean, he remembers like the Rapper Dasher, 1930s bullshit that used to be on the radio. He's a bigger fan of the black music, uh, the rock music, the blues music, and everything like that than any of that Rapidash shit that was around when he was a kid.
That's
I,
awesome.
you know, we just don't care. If it's good, we don't care, and that's the thing that we have to kind of remember. Just be good. Just be good at what you do, and we're not. If you're a smart, reasonable, not racist, not sexist person, you're not going to be checking off boxes on who created it. It's just going to be good. So just enjoy good art.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah